So you've got to make decisions based on an individual player, not necessarily in history. Do you look at? Of course you do, but individual players are all at a different stage, physically, mentally, and so you can't put too much into the history of, say, a second overall pick.
Since the draft lottery, has your opinion changed at all on whether either of those top 2 rated guys in your mind would be NHL ready or not? Have you seen, I guess just the combine.
Again, whoever we pick, the combine doesn't tell you much. You know, physically, I mean, you kind of know where they're at, and then you see the results there, but that doesn't tell you a whole lot. You do get a little bit out of it, but it's certainly not going to tell you how close a guy is to playing. But I don't think there's a ton of guys in this draft that are going to play this year, or that I think should play this year. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to specifically talk about the top 2, but you guys know what's out there. I've seen what's out there. I know it's top 2 guys. There's 2 guys that everybody thinks are just 2, and you know, we've certainly heard some other things, and certainly not going to get into, but consensus top 2, I guess. Yeah, there's a consensus top 2, but look back at the history of the draft. There's been a lot of consensus top whatever, and you look and you go, oh my God. So you got to be really careful with consensus.
You hit it tonight.
You go back in the history, you haven't had many of these wingers in the later rounds. How important is it for you to nail somebody, you know, with all these picks you have?
It's huge. I've told our guys, our guys have done a really good job. Our amateur staff, if you look the last 3 or 4 years, they've done a really good job. But there's no time to get complacent, and they got to be good every year, just like we expect our players to be, and everybody in the organization. They got to be good every year, and we got 11 picks, so they got to be good, and we expect to hit on late round picks. Not everyone, obviously, that would be unrealistic, but. And it's not, like you mentioned Lindblom, okay, if he turns out, yeah, it's a terrific pick, right? But if you look at it a couple years later, you can still look and say, it was a good pick. It was a good pick. And that's more what you want. All your players, 2 years later, you say, okay, 5th round pick, he was a good pick because he's a good prospect. It's still a good pick, even if he doesn't quite make it. So it's kind of what you're looking for is 2 years down the road, you look and you say, okay, we had 11 picks, and you know, 7 of them have a pretty good chance of playing. That's kind of what. Now they're all not going to play, but if you pull 4, it's pretty good. But again, we've had a lot of picks in the last 3 or 4 years. So yes, we need a lot of young players out of those picks. There's going to be years where we don't have 11 picks. We're going to have 5 picks or 7 picks. So yeah, we have to make hay right now.
A lot of quality defensemen in the pipeline. Fair to say that you'll be looking at more at forwards? If 2 players are equal, you'll be looking more at forwards than defensemen?
You know, I think I said this to you guys last year, the year before. We get 11 picks. So you kind of look at it and say, okay, this year we do have a lot of defensemen. So if we got somewhere in the range of 7, 3, and 1, right now in a perfect world, I sit here and I say if we got 7 forwards, 3D, and a goalie, probably perfect world. Now, we're not going to pick a goalie if we don't see a goalie as a value pick. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we get a guy where we like the pick where he's still there, then we'll take a goalie. But we're not going to chase a goalie this year. I would expect we'll pick one, but again, we're not going to chase one. D, you know, if we get 2, I'm okay with that. If we get 4, I'm okay with that. But again, right now, I'd say if you look at a perfect breakdown, you'd say 7, 3, and 1, assuming we make all our picks.
Your roster numbers for next year.
Let's say, I'm just making this up, 7-2 was the scouting, you know, the consensus was 7-2 for something. You wouldn't have a problem with going against the
well, it's really hard because when you're 7-2, whatever, certain scouts have seen a guy a lot, and other scouts may have seen a guy twice. So you got to be really careful weighing it just 7-2, or your area guy's seen a guy 6, 8, 9 times. maybe even the year before. He's got a lot of information on him. So it's not quite as easy as saying, okay, 4-3, so let's go with the 4. You always got to put a little bit more stock in, and you got to talk it through, you know, and you got to, like, you got to ask hard questions, and it's difficult. There's a lot of guys, you go through the draft, there's a lot of guys that are close. You know, you say our 44, like there'll be good debate on 44, because there's going to be who knows how many players there, 4, 6, 8, 10 that we could choose. Sometimes it weeds itself out to 1 or 2 where it's a little bit easier, but a lot of times there's a lot of different ways you can go. But that's why you got to, like, we got meetings starting again Sunday morning. And we just had them in last week for 4 days, and we're going to go through it again, because you got to be prepared at the table. You can't be sitting there going, okay, well, what do we do now? You don't have much time to make decisions.
A free agency move or a transaction that would bring in a veteran defenseman in the offseason, is it a bit more of a challenge for you guys if you had to fill it up with two guys out of the minors? You already had a young defense at the beginning.
Yeah, that doesn't scare me, because don't forget, our guys in the minors, they've been there. So they're a little more ready for this level than a kid coming out of junior college. I mean, they put some time in, so part of the reason to be in a minor so they don't come up here and make a horrendous amount of mistakes, right? They're ready for the next challenge, or we're hoping they're ready for the next challenge because of the time that they have spent in the minors.
At the end of last year when you brought a couple of different guys up?
Yeah, I mean, 1 game or 2 games you got to be careful, because you start evaluating at this level. 1 or 2 games, they're absolutely, they've got an enormous amount of energy your first NHL game. I mean, Hager was 3-3 and he played a hell of a game. Like, that doesn't happen very often. There's that adrenaline that you have naturally playing your first NHL game. Now that can go the other way too. It can make you play a terrible game because you're so wound up and you're not thinking, you're just out there. You're so wound up that you can't react. So, but I thought both the kids at the end of the year played good. Not to say those are the only 2 guys that have a shot, because they're not. They're going to be certainly 2 guys that are in the mix, but they got to come into camp and show us that they're ready to play on this team, and not only play at that level, but make us a better team. That's what it's about. It's not about putting young players in the lineup. It's about those young kids making us a better team.